Hi, my name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Innovation Showcase. The main purpose of this ongoing series is to inform viewers about exciting innovations and creative individuals across the fields of business, science, technology, education, and the arts. Today, via Zoom, we're fortunate to have as our guest Adam Tendler. Adam is a highly accomplished, Grammy-nominated pianist, composer, and author, with the Lincoln Center Award for Emerging Artists being just one of the prestigious honors he's received. Recently, Adam was selected to be the artist in residence at the Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, New York. He's here today to inform us about the installation he's created there entitled Exit Strategy. This fascinating undertaking explores the way we attach ourselves to memories and physical objects left by families and friends after they've passed away. We'll go on a behind the scenes tour and in the process come to better understand and appreciate the wide range of items displayed by Adam and the local Greenwood community and the role these items can play in the grieving process. Let's start by meeting Adam and hearing all about exit strategy and the Greenwood Cemetery. Welcome, Adam. So delighted you're able to be here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
It's been fascinating reading and finding out about yourself, the exit strategy installation, and the Greenwood Cemetery itself. Eager to hear more and have you inform viewers. But before we jump right to that, I think it would be of interest if you just briefly share a little bit more about your background, perhaps artistic, professional interest, please.
Sure. I'm a trained pianist. My sort of bread and butter and my main art form and my reputation is as a concert pianist, and in particular playing music by living or modern composers. So I've been doing that for a couple decades, and the reputation I have is for playing sort of experimental and contemporary music by either modern figures or my peers. That said, I'm classically trained. I went to conservatory, and so I enjoy also performing concert, classical music as well. Um, After I've sort of always been interested in kind of DIY culture, kind of do it yourself ways of conducting my career. And that really, the most, I think, striking encapsulation of that was a 50-state tour I did out of my car when I was 23 years old. And I played in, all 50 states. I was just going out of my car. The concerts were free. I was trying to focus on sort of underserved communities. Um, and even then it was modern music that I was playing. And so I bring that up though, because after that tour, I wrote a book about that experience. And so I like to sort of say, and I've been composing my whole life, sort of occasionally, and so I kind of call myself sort of an accidental or occasional composer. And so my kind of creative garden for a couple of decades now has been being a concert pianist, but also writing, and also, you know, uh, kind of creating concert experiences and trying to sort of like and composing. And so I'm getting ahead of myself, but when I approached Greenwood Cemetery and I applied to be artist in residence there, I was pretty upfront by saying there are different parts of my garden, and very rarely do they all get to play together or all get to be together in one spot. And I said, even though I've like designed posters and album covers or whatever, the one thing I've never actually really done is like visual art or called myself a visual artist in any way. And I said, so we'd be bringing in this sort of fourth thing. So we have piano in some way, we have writing in some way, we have composition in some way, but
Mhm.
how do we also create sort of an immersive visual experience for people? And I was I was very upfront saying, I don't actually know. And I said, I'm also sort of like a sort of outspoken kind of queer artist. And I said, it's going to be that too. I don't know how, but it will be that as well. And so I said, just expect that there's going to be some sort of installation or organism that will function without me needing to be there, but it's going to be all of these things at once. Um, So that's a little bit about myself. I have several albums that span everything from a composer named Julius Eastman, who's that's a Grammy-nominated album that I was featured on. He was a queer, politically radical, really fascinating Black artist from sort of the 70s through 1990. And another album is Franz Liszt. So I enjoy that diversity in my work. But yeah, I'm a pianist first, and when people visit, for instance, Exit Strategy, which I know we'll get to, I kind of introduce myself as that. I'm a pianist. That's why there's a piano in the space. So short answer, I'm a pianist, but also an artist who brings all these other kind of facets to the table.
No, I really appreciate the range of your interest and your ongoing sort of desire and willingness to explore new areas, push the boundaries as you have with this installation. Before we get to it, would you just share, because I found this fascinating as well, Greenwood Cemetery itself, for those watching who aren't familiar with it, like I was before doing some reading and viewing, would you share some programs, the property, whatever
Sure.
you think
It's
you'd like to share at this
I would
time?
invite anybody who's really curious and wants specifics to just really visit, the Greenwood Cemetery website because it'll tell you how many acres. It's a lot. It looks when you look at like say a Google map of Brooklyn, you'll see Prospect Park, which is huge. It's like Central Park, and then there's this other green kind of swath of land, which is almost just as big. That's Greenwood Cemetery. It's that big. Um, it's very hilly. If you're at certain points, you can see the whole city. You can see the Statue of Liberty and Staten Island. It's truly this like bucolic campus
Hmm.
that has been around for uh, over a century. It's from the 1800s. I had the privilege of being able to look through like maps and different plot schemes that date to the 1800s. But beyond just being a cemetery, and people often say, cemeteries used to be these cultural gathering spots. There's these famous kind of pictures, antiquated pictures of people having picnics in cemeteries, and it seems like, oh, that's so strange, or what an unusual artifact of another time. That's still very much a thing at Greenwood. That was
Mhm.
already a thing at Greenwood, and I should add that there's some very famous people who are buried there, from Jean-Michel Basquiat to Leonard Bernstein. Um, but there's also, it has a long history, both as being sort of just regular folks being buried there, from different sort of cultures and different parts of the New York society. Uh, but it also has a long history of just being a gathering place for people to visit. And that tradition of visiting the cemetery is something that seems very, forgive, it's an unintentional pun, alive and well at Greenwood. So when I've been working there, or when I visit Exit Strategy, my installation there, which resulted after a year of being artist in residence at Greenwood Cemetery, um, so many of the people coming through are just visiting the cemetery. And exit strategy is actually not even at the main entrance, is this giant Gothic, amazing gate. It's so overwhelming and beautiful. Exit strategy is at this other gate, which is less grand, and it's sort of just like the other side of the park. Um, that that's really interesting to me because the people who are going through that gate are really just like entering the cemetery for very personal reasons. And oftentimes those personal reasons are to just get some peace and quiet, or just to walk in nature. And a lot of young people, like mostly young people. So I've been really kind of fascinated and surprised to see that the visitors of Greenwood and those who I've really interfaced with, whether or not they're actually participating in exit strategy, which we'll get to, or just kind of passing through and accidentally coming upon it. They're not necessarily, or usually like 99% of the time, not visiting someone who's buried there. And often they're really young. Like they're just young folks who are just like really kind of cool, like cool people. Not to say that older people are not, but just like cool, kind of punky hipster like people who are just like visiting the cemetery. And I've
Interesting.
had friends of mine just be like, I came upon your exhibit, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what were you even doing there? And they'll tell me, Greenwood is like a sacred place to me, not in a religious sense, but in a sense of them getting away. And Yeah, I was there yesterday and a woman was visiting with her kids and they had a bag of McDonald's and they were probably having a picnic. And so this idea that we have that like that tradition is something from the 1800s, it's truly continuing at Greenwood all the time. And they don't even make a thing about it. During the eclipse, that Greenwood was packed.
Mm.
And I should add, of course, they have, and it seems to be increasing, a real artistic sort of program and presence there. They have grief groups, they have creative sort of groups where people can get together and knit and they talk. And so they have different ways for vessels for allowing people to process and connect through their own grief, but in ways that are very positive and often creative. And they have like a concert series and a dance, like an art series. They team with another group here in New York called Angels Share Death of Classical, where they present concerts in a catacombs there, which I've performed in twice. And they have an artist in residency program, and I was the third of artists in residence to be a part of that program. So it's a real sort of artistic uh, hub, actually,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think it kind of always has been.
No, I was fascinated to read and find out about it. And as we're going to hear as we move on to exit strategy, you definitely picked up and built upon that nature of inviting the community in as they participated in the installation along with you. So, starting out, just a little bit of why and how the installation came about.
Sure. You know, when I it started with this piano. So that piano, it started with that piano, and that was the only object we had.
Hmm.
It was that piano belonged to someone who was buried at Greenwood, and Greenwood kind of again, I led by the saying I'm a pianist, and so they said, "Well, you should have a piano." So originally, we thought we'd bring in a real concert instrument. I'm a Yamaha artist, so I thought maybe, well, Yamaha can perhaps bring a piano, and I said, "Well, if you have one, let's explore it." And I went, they have Greenwood actually has a lot of artifacts from art to objects and different relics that belonged to people who are buried there. And this piano was sort of in this basement area, all wrapped up. The legs were off of it. And so I visited. That was the first thing I did is I visited that piano and I was like, I think I could use this. And we moved it into this space that you see here, which was originally just going to be my studio space. And the
Hmm.
more I got to know the piano, and God love this piano, and I mean this affectionately, the more I realized this was not a concert instrument. And this was not going to work as a concert instrument. And that was very compromised. It's just the way it was. It was just like the pedals weren't working properly and different hammers. And I was just like, okay, well, this piano might start to become more sculptural than actually like a utility for making music. And that sort of started the idea that I am not going to write the Greenwood Cemetery Sonata.
Uh-huh.
Like
Yeah.
suddenly this started to look like this is going to have to be, outside of the box, forgive the cliche. And so that's when the next step was like, thinking about, well, the piano is this vessel for experience for me. All my dirty laundry is kind of packed into this thing. And every time I play anyone from Bach to my own music to any contemporary composer, I'm taking all of that gunk, all that stuff, all that laundry, and it gets pushed through it, or I'm carrying in it, or it's exploding out of this instrument. And that's when the next steps started just to be like, what if we start putting stuff in this piano? It was a very shocking image at first. And at first that was all it was. But then I started to play and record on that piano, and all the while I was recording music wherever I was, whether it was organ music, which people hear when they go into space, or piano music that was on that piano, both with clothes in it and without. So throughout this residency, I was both building sort of a library of music while writing. I guess I'll just keep going right into it. I was also
Yeah.
writing about. I started thinking about who it, can I think of every person I've ever known who has passed away, whether they were huge figures in my life, like really important figures, or friends or acquaintances, but who has died that I could actually talk about. And so that became a thing, that a kind of practice that I was doing in that studio space and anywhere I could. I just created a long list and I would just write free stream of conscious about my experience with them. while also processing sort of my own kind of personal like relationship transitions and my own sort of issues, frankly, and the idea of this sort of existential idea of what is an exit strategy. Um, what does that mean in my life, whether it's leaving a situation, whether it's leaving a relationship, whether when I'm in a cemetery, the big picture stuff of what happens when we leave this earth, that kind of big how, when, and where do we go, those big questions, that became sort of a subject of the journal. And it all got kind of unloaded into this journal. And some of it's pretty like tough stuff. Like when you
Sure.
think about exit strategy and when I think about like difficult situations, it's a kind of a taboo subject, but so often sometimes my first thought would be like, I don't belong here. I don't want to be on this planet. Or I'm not good for anybody, or I'm not
Mm,
good for this relationship. So, or I'm not good in this career. I've wasted this. I want out. And that doesn't mean I'm going to do it, but I just found it interesting that, I mean, I know it's horrible to talk about, but I also just thought it was interesting how often that kind of thought would just kind of go right in, and whether it goes right out, that's fine. But I just found that sort of existential option and idea being something that was also really scary, but real. And so
mm,
all of that went into this writing. And so in the very beginning, there was a ton of laundry. There was a ton of clothes in the piano, and those were and on the walls, and those belonged primarily either to my father, who passed away unexpectedly, or to friends, or that I connected to experiences with people who had passed away. Also going up on the walls was sort of pillars of this journal. I copied them in kind of big thing, and I created sort of pillars of that. That was what we had in the beginning.
mm.
And then I started to kind of I started kind of deepening the visual aspect. I started to plant the piano into dirt. I wanted there to be a sense of earth, since we're at
Yeah.
wood. And then eventually I splattered the walls with this this question. Greenwood was very kind to me and very patient in letting me kind of take this space and play with the juxtaposition of what looks rather sacred as a space. There's stained glass,
Mhm.
there's Saint
Yeah.
Cecilia, there's like the patron saint of music is there, and then to kind of splatter it. And I kind of liked that juxtaposition of like a sanctuary, a place where I can actually put these sort of accidental inheritances, my father's underwear, stuff he didn't, his socks, shoes, stuff he didn't intend for me to have, but that I do accidentally, and I don't know what to do with it. A place for that, but also a stuff for all the gunk in my head. And so then in a way it's a sanctuary, but then all that stuff is also stuff that I can't escape from. And then you wonder if this is actually a bit of a cell or kind of a prison. I wanted that mess, that kind of visceral, violent messiness to be really present in the space and to be quite overwhelming. And so when they came in, I don't know, can you go back to how the space looked in maybe before, when it was just, even before that? Sorry. Yeah. So in the beginning, it was rather clean. If you
Yeah.
see, we had a piano, blah, blah, blah. There was a stack of shoes. There's a couple pieces of underwear, which they were not super thrilled about, because that was all we had in the beginning. It was all kind of just my stuff. And then over time, it started to fill up. And so if you go a little later, you can see, so you start to see other objects on the wall. This became sort of the next step of exit strategy when I thought, okay, well, we have all of my stuff here, my memories, my personal drama. You can see the pillars, like all the stuff in the middle that looks like the big pages. That's all my stuff.
Mm,
But then I started, and you also have my objects. So I was like, okay, weirdly enough, I don't think that's enough. I don't think that that's frankly even that I don't know if that's interesting enough to carry this or to say, everybody, come one, come all, and experience my trauma or whatever.
mm, mm,
I just was like, I don't know if that's super like relevant or even helpful to anybody. Like, oh, so this pianist artist, whatever, is thinking these thoughts. I mean, so what? I mean, it's fine, but I don't know. So, and they hear the pretty music and they hear and so all that's well and good. But I think that this can be more relevant. And I think this can actually be more powerful and more helpful if this is a space where I want people to actually come as a sort of a place of refuge or a place where they can actually put their gunk,
mhm.
forgive the expression. So I know I'm just like blasting you, but
No, it's fabulous. You're hitting all the
that's
important things. I think you're going to get to the open studio sessions that you created.
that's what happened. And so I suggested to Greenwood, I said, I think what I've done so far could be used as an example for what the community can now do. So if I was writing, what if they write now? And if I'm bringing objects in, well, what if they bring in objects now? And if I'm recording my voice, whispering and saying my own testimony, well, what if they can?
Mm.
And so we created like an email address that people could send stuff to. Um, and I think most profoundly, I mean, and I mean that because it was really profound experience for me. We set up these open studios, three over the course of the spring, in which I was present and I was working in the space, kind of tinkering around. And in those times, and they kind of advertised it to their community via email blasts and also those aforementioned groups, like grief groups, creative groups, where like knitting groups, all these they would bring this opportunity to them and say, well, for 10 minutes today, you have the opportunity, if you wish, to write as a prompt something about someone you lost, or something about your grief, or something about an exit strategy. Um, it will be integrated into this exhibit. And so that's how people learned that these open studios were happening. And the big thing of this open studio is not just writing, was that people could bring in objects. And they did. And that was really,
Mm.
really, I mean, it was very powerful and it was very humbling. So people were bringing in the clothing, primarily clothing of people they'd lost. And if you go back, I can point out. So if you look, yeah, here, if you look to the upper left,
Uh-huh.
that was a child's shirt that a mother
Mm.
brought in. I mean, it
Yeah.
brings tears to my eyes because she had said she came in, she was very emotional, and she had said that my son is buried here. And I just sort of immediately thought, well, that's a grown up, that's an adult. And
Yeah.
then she gave me that shirt, and I just, you know, those were the kind of conversations I was having for about 8 hours straight
Wow.
during these open studios. A teacher brought in a shell. I don't think it's visible in any of the pictures. A tiny shell, but it is up on the wall there. Um, and it was a shell that a student of hers 30 years ago had brought back to her from
Mm.
a Make-A-Wish trip. He was diagnosed with AIDS as a child. And this was during a period, in the early 90s when being diagnosed with AIDS meant something much different than now.
Mm.
And indeed, he died soon after that. And she had kept this shell. He would have been in his 40s now, she told me. She had kept this shell that entire time. And she released that shell and brought it into exit strategy.
Mm.
So
Wow.
again, you said, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a pianist. And so I would have these moments where I'd be thinking, I can't believe I'm in this position. And she was also very emotional, of course, rightly so. And the people who brought in their objects, the premise is you're not getting it back, which is a powerful part of it. Like you are
Mm.
releasing this is a part of your
Mm.
release. It's not because I'm keeping it, but it's a part of it is that you're not going to get it back. It's going to be either be paid forward or recycled or something. Um, and with the shell, I actually asked sort of as an aside, I was like, listen, no one's here. I know what I've said is that
Mm.
I keep it. Do you want this back? Like I was that affected by her story that I was willing to sort of break the promise of my own exhibit and just be like, come back at the end of the summer, I'll give this back to you. And she was like, no, I don't. I'm
Mm.
ready. And the tears are something else. And that conversation happened several times with people who were very emotional. And I would kind of ask if they were sure about what they were doing. And they were saying, yes, they've been waiting for a place to put some of these things. Where do I put my mother's fur coat? She even liked fur, like those kind of things. And so that was a very powerful part of this exhibit. And that stuff is on the wall. The fur coat's there, the shell is
Mm.
there, the child's shirt is there, all this stuff. There's artwork that people brought in. And what's funny is not all of it is people who have passed away. The artwork, this beautiful piece of art this man brought in. And I said, did this person pass away who painted this? And he said, no, it's my ex. And I
Mm.
just think that's great.
Wow.
I think that's fantastic because I think grief takes many forms. And some of our deepest grief can be about a relationship that's collapsed. I have to say, this picture right here of that beautiful pink kind of tulle,
Yeah.
that looks like that was some amazing, like great choice of mine. It wasn't. That's someone brought that in. That was her dog's Sweet 16 dress material.
Wow.
I laugh because it's kind of wild, but the dog didn't make it to 16. Like the dog had a quinceañera dress made from that material, and then her, owner, the dog's owner, was going to make a Sweet 16 dress, and with that remaining material, and it didn't happen. The dog passed away. Um, but that material has become like the cornerstone of the project. It's become a focal point. And so the community has actually, as I hoped, really kind of guided, diverted, kind of subverted this project in many powerful ways. Um, and that woman who with the dog, she's come, a lot of these people have come back to check on their stuff and to see how it's been integrated. And that's also been very powerful. Um, and so now that it's open, since I'm not there, I kind of didn't want, I figured that the object part of this project is sort of over. I just kind of didn't want there to be a box where people put stuff. I thought that looked a little bit maybe visually odd. But I was like, I do think it'd be interesting if people could keep writing and use this space where, again, there's kind of an overwhelming musical presence in this space. And it's very kind of, I don't know, I think it's very cool, but it's either piano music or organ music or whispering. And through a chance sort of determined means, sometimes that's all happening at once. Sometimes they're overlapping in interesting ways. Sometimes it's silent. And so I wanted that space to be a place where people could continue to contribute to the project. So all of these, like see those little pieces of paper, those are what people have been now adding since Exit Strategy opened. And if you go
Mhm.
back like 20 million pictures, you'll see those desks. Those desks are there for people to, yeah, see those desks there. And if you go even, I think one more, yeah, those desks are there for people to sit and write. And there's pens and there's paper provided. Everything is a bit intentional. Like the fact that those are school desks is intentional. Like I think we carry a lot from our youth. We carry a lot from our childhood. Part of that can be our schooling, but part of that can be our experience with our grown-ups, our families. I wanted to kind of create a sense of not of regression in a way
Mhm.
of being sitting in these desks and be
Mhm.
like, when's the last time I sat in a desk like this
Yeah.
and something and put it in a anonymous box? That's all intentional. It's to sort of like create a really unusual but somehow familiar experience. Um, and honestly, every time I go in now, it's open only on the weekends. And every time when I go in, I go in during the week when it's not open, and I open this sort of locked box where people have placed stuff. And it's like every week there's more writing. Like it's almost multiplying every week. The more people, there's just so many people submitting their testimonies. And my theory is that the space is so raw emotionally, and the more people are seeing how many others have contributed, I think it's inspiring them to do the same. I think it's helping them feel less alone. It's helping them feel safe to kind of privately leave and put something here where it doesn't have a place anywhere else. And yeah, I've just found it really fascinating that as this project is now sort of rounding out, it's open for about another month,
Mhm.
that it seems to be hitting sort of this climax in terms of participation. But truly, every week I'm like, I wonder if anyone left any this weekend. It seemed like a quiet weekend, and I'm usually not even there. But I'll just think, I don't know. I hope there's like something, and there will be packed. It'll be full, and I think, oh my gosh, what's going on here? It's almost shocking, and so it's it's a it's really inspiring and humbling to see this project sort of working.
Oh, it's fascinating and fascinating. And it's been wonderful, so engaging hearing you just describe it from the beginning, the genesis, the development. I mean, it speaks to your creativity that you hinted about earlier in the introduction of taking an idea. That's what I find very fascinating with highly accomplished artists like
Mhm.
yourself
Thank
is
you.
the creative mind and the process, the openness, the playfulness,
Yeah.
even in a place like a cemetery, to
And it is.
explore new ideas and to see what you get. And the way you've collaborated with the community is noteworthy in itself.
Well,
And
thank you.
the only thing I regret is we've come to the end of the
Yes.
program. You mentioned music. We don't have time to enjoy some, but we can point people to the direction of SoundCloud.
Yeah.
Your website will be there to
Sure.
find.
And the Greenwood website has a way for people to hear some of the music that they would hear in that space. And really
I'll
being in
put.
that space and being engulfed in it is pretty profound and powerful.
Oh, I've enjoyed listening to a few of the pieces. The way you set the mood. I mean, that's a whole other program indeed to hear your
Thank you.
thinking behind that. But
Thank
I'm
you. Thank you
sorry
for
that we.
listening. And I'm sorry if I'm so long-winded, but I really am very proud of this. For
Oh,
something
you
that
were so.
started, for something that started, I didn't know what it was going to do or if I could do it. To see it actually, I'm very proud of it now. And so
Yeah.
I'm thrilled to be sharing it with people.
No, I look forward to following your future endeavors.
Thank you
Good
for this.
luck with other steps you take in your career. And
Thank you.
thanks again for being here, Adam.
Thank you.
Also want to thank those of you watching for joining us and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.